All right. It's time for Buckeye Grove Instant Access.
It's about time.
With the latest breaking news, analysis, and much, much more from around the world of Ohio State. Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You're so money and you don't even know it.
Let's move quickly and hand it off to our host, Kevin Noon.
It's time to start running!
Hey, welcome to the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. Once again, the BIA podcast, Buckeye Grove Instant Access, will be joined by Braden Moles here in a second. It is Monday morning, late morning, and the NFL draft is in the books. We have done a couple of shows where we've gone through the first round and then day two with rounds 2 and 3. We decided to take a break on Sunday as we had an opportunity to speak with Ryan Day. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But now we have an opportunity to talk about the draft in general now that all 255 picks, 7 rounds are in the books. The vast majority of undrafted free agents know their deals at this point, and we're now back in a vast wasteland of no sports. So, maybe Ohio State recruiting needs to pick it up and fill the void a little bit. But that's for a different show. Let me bring Braden in. Braden, how you doing, man?
Good. How about you?
Doing
glad
well.
Glad to have some sports.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you sit there and you look at the ratings of the draft through the 3 days. Which market has the highest ratings of any market in the United States of America? Columbus, Ohio. Are you shocked?
Not at all. Columbus loves their Ohio State.
Yeah, exactly. And being between Cleveland and Cincinnati, and even with geography, there's a good number of Pittsburgh Steeler fans. Columbus, Ohio, football crazy. We can't keep a secondary league, the XFL or whatever afloat long enough, but I don't know why they don't put a team in Columbus, Ohio, just based on the numbers that Columbus in general does. But that's for another time, another place. Vince McMahon isn't returning my emails when I'm trying to tell him how to fix his wrestling product either. But when it comes to this draft, Ohio State, 10 players drafted. That's, tied for second most, only behind LSU, who had 14, which ties Ohio State's 2004 draft total as a record. We've talked about a lot of the guys through the first 3 rounds. Ohio State put 7 guys in the 3 rounds, and then we get into day 3, rounds 4 through 7. A lot of people expected KJ Hill to come off the board sooner than he did. He doesn't come off until pick 220, LA Chargers. What were your thoughts about it? I mean, obviously we had an opportunity to ask Ryan Day his thoughts.
It really was a shocking slide to me because, we saw mock drafts where he went as high as the 3rd round, which wouldn't have been crazy considering the run on receivers we saw early on. This was one of the deepest classes of wide receivers in the history of the NFL draft. So it really was surprising to see Hill fall as far as he did. I think he ends up in a nice landing place with the Chargers, but, pick 220 is not representative of his skill and what he did at Ohio State. Ohio State's all-time leading receiver in terms of receptions. It isn't, it was just shocking seeing that slide because he has the talent to have been an earlier pick. So I don't know if it was, something where it was something we don't know about, whether it be an undisclosed injury or something or whatever it may be, whether teams project that he won't be able to do much besides playing in the slot. So, yeah, it was just shocking to see.
Yeah, getting back to the Ryan Day situation, I'm going to read a quote from him from the call on Sunday. "I'm not telling anybody how to do their business, but I just know some great coaches said that the best receivers get open and they catch the ball. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what you run or anything like that. Do you get open? Do you catch the ball?" KJ Hill had 201 receptions during his Ohio State career, 20 touchdowns, north of 2,300 yards. And Ryan Day would go on to say that he never saw anybody cover KJ Hill on a consistent basis. Doesn't seem to add up for what, for a 7th round draft position.
Yeah, like you said, it's just you want the guys that can catch the ball. And KJ Hill did that at a rate that nobody else did at Ohio State. So it was just surprising to see him fall like that. Like I said, we don't know exactly why. It may just be, we had that wrong on the receivers early in the draft. After that, maybe it was just other positions kind of had their time in the spotlight. It's surprising a team like the Packers didn't take him earlier. They're in desperate need of a receiver, and just, nobody turned the card in. So it was surprising to see. And, I felt a little bad for him watching him fall like that. But I think, even more so than maybe J.K. Dobbins, who also saw a slide in the draft, I think Hill will have a definite chip on his shoulder going into his first season.
Right. It's a very small fraternity of people who actually know, and not anybody really knows the entire picture. Each team's personnel departments and whatnot, will know why they had their board stacked the way that they did. My belief, maybe the measurables weren't there. Maybe the 40 just didn't wow teams, but the amount of time that NFL personnel spend around the Ohio State program and just what KJ put on the tape, it doesn't make sense to me. But now he has an opportunity with the Chargers to be able to step up and add to that legacy of recent Ohio State receivers in terms of the NFL. I mean, Terry McLaurin, certainly he was not drafted that low. I mean, he went number 76 overall in the third round a year before, went on to be one of the most impressive offensive rookies in college football, or in NFL football, I'm sorry. And, there's a little bit of a different situation, but I think that it'll fuel the fire of Hill. I mean, just knowing Hill for as many years as I have, I mean, it'll definitely be something that carries him.
Yeah, I think regardless of where you're selected, once you are picked to a team and you have a chance to go on that roster, your chances as good as anybody else's to make that team and make a big impact. And I think, with what we saw from Hill at Ohio State, he has that drive to. I think he's going to make a big impact on the Charger. He pick 220 doesn't have a nice ring to it necessarily, but regardless of where he's picked at, we know he is going to be able to make an impact with the Chargers.
And let's rewind it about 21 picks to pick 199 in the 6th round. Jordan Fuller goes to the other Los Angeles team, the Rams. The 6th round is about what I'd seen in terms of a lot of mock drafts. I saw him anywhere from late 5 to early 7. I think going into, during draft season last year, I think a lot of people thought that Fuller was going to be higher in terms of the draft. And, for one reason or another, it just never really materialized. But I think that's another good opportunity for him in a Rams system that I think that he has a definite shot of making the 53.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was definitely I would say, quieter guy amongst the members of the Ohio State secondary to win into the draft. I mean, Jeff Okudah, one of the best cornerbacks in the nation. Damon Arnett, one of the better ones, and probably one of the more passionate, one of the more passionate cornerbacks in the draft this year. So, I mean, Fuller was certainly a little more under the radar in terms of those guys. But I think, when it comes down to it, he was still, one of the best members of Ohio State's defense last year and for the last few seasons as kind of their, featured safety in their defense. So I think he certainly has a great chance of making the Rams 53. He may not be a starter in his first season or first couple of seasons, but I think he'll provide some good depth for him. And, I think eventually once he's had some time in the NFL, I think he'll be able to make a shot to start for a team.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. And then the 10th and final Buckeye to be drafted, number 235, Detroit Lions, Jayshon Cornell. The Lions taking 3 Buckeyes. We have to laugh a little bit about that. I mean, obviously with the proximity to Ann Arbor up there. Cornell, a little bit of a different situation because he was the only Buckeye not invited to the NFL Scouting Combine to get drafted.
Yeah, it was difficult, especially with, you're looking at a situation where players weren't invited to the Combine this year, but then I think basically every pro day in America was canceled this year as well. So teams really did not have those little small numbers like, your 40 time or your 3 cone numbers, whatever it may be. They didn't have those little numbers on Cornell. So it was still nice to see him go in the draft. And, with how great of a final season he had, 30 tackles, 7.5 for a loss with 4 sacks. It was great to see him go where he did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when he came in, he and Justin Hilliard committed to Ohio State within an hour of each other. It was kind of a planned commitment. He was a high 4-star recruit, if I recall correctly. He was a guy that early in his career you really didn't hear much from, and then he just kept contributing more and more and more. And even you didn't realize at the end of games that he played as many snaps, and it wasn't a fact of just because he was out there and invisible. I mean, he was making an impact while he was out there, but you hear so much of the Bosas and the Chase Youngs and the other names, and and Cornell really put together a nice final season.
Yeah, I mean, it really felt like him and Devon Hamilton had kind of a similar path going into this year's draft. They have their first few years at Ohio State where they're just kind of picking up a few sacks and tackles for loss, and then really just exploding in that final season under Larry Johnson. Just seeing them, it was great seeing them grow throughout their careers at Ohio State, and then seeing that finally come to fruition in that final season with, making a really big impact on Ohio State's defense, even though they still had, Ohio State had the stars and Jeff Okudah and Chase Young, but they were still able to make a big impact on Ohio State's defense. So it was nice to see them kind of grow in Ohio State and then eventually earn that draft spot.
We have a lot more to talk about here in the 2020 draft, and we will get to that here on the other side of a quick break.
Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com.
Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, joined by Braden Moles, and we are talking the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, for 10 players that are very happy that they were drafted and will be forever known as draftees, a lot more players did not hear their name called and are now having to go through the undrafted free agency process, which obviously is going to be a little different this year based on virtual OTA type situations and whatnot with the COVID-19 pandemic still gripping this country. Braden has the rundown on the list of guys who signed free agent deals.
Yeah, we had first, stuff kind of started to filter out after the NFL draft ended. We have Brandon Bowen going to Carolina. Rashad Berry headed to New England. Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack are going to be joining each other in New York with the Giants. Liam McCullough has signed a contract with Las Vegas. And Robert Landers is still currently waiting for that contract. So best wishes to him as he waits to hear back.
Yeah, BB is just one of those situations. I likened him a lot to Roosevelt Nix, who Columbus area guy who played at Kent State in his college ball and then went to the Steelers and kind of has bounced around in terms of positions. He definitely doesn't have that prototypical NFL size, but I'm hoping that he finds a position. But there are a lot of people talking about how he really kind of falls into that tweener position. I mean, honestly, when it came to just talking to players on the team about football, not football, whatever, one of my most enjoyable conversations of the year was always BB Landers.
Yeah, he was always great to talk to, and as fun as it was watching him on the field, it was also fun seeing him during the skull sessions, rocking the cowboy hat and suit coming into Ohio Stadium. So, he may not have been the most prolific player on Ohio State's defense, but he was often making an impact, even if other people were usually the ones getting the praise and the ESPN highlights and whatever it may be. So, best wishes to him. Hope he's able to pick up a contract at some point because, he may not have had the most prolific career, but he certainly grew during his time at Ohio State.
Absolutely. A player that I want to talk about specifically, Ryan Day talked about him in terms of being an undrafted free agent. Brandon Bowen, he was a player that had a couple of different starting stints with the Buckeyes, was a guard, got hurt, missed a significant amount of time, came back as a tackle, I mean, he certainly has the versatility to play 4 positions on the line. Obviously the things get a lot more specialized when you get into the NFL. It's not as easy to plug and play as it is maybe in the college game. He goes to a Carolina Panthers team that also had a undrafted offensive lineman in Andrew Norwell. Norwell had a lot of success in Carolina, went on to sign a very lucrative free agent deal elsewhere. It just goes to show, whether it's offensive line or really anywhere, that not being drafted is not really a sentence to the end of your playing career. There still is opportunity. I mean, there's more opportunity the higher you're drafted. They're willing to work with you a little bit more because of maybe the investment they have there, but the cream really rises to the top.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a symptom of Bowen's entire career, in that he just wants a chance, an opportunity. With the injuries he's had at Ohio State, it's just simply once he's healthy and once he's able to get on the field, he's able to show how talented he is, and we were able to see that in his finally healthy his finally healthy senior year, in which, he was part of one of the best offensive lines in college football. So I think, it's just once he gets to Carolina, just giving him a chance, during virtual OTAs, whatever it may be, giving him a chance to show what he can do. I think Carolina's going to be happy with what they got.
And once again, another player who was not invited to the NFL Scouting Combine. I mean, I'm sure that there was a level of medicals that were sent out to NFL teams and whatnot, but not being at the Combine really does kind of limit some of the things that you're able to do or have done in terms of being able to show your recovery from an injury or multiple injuries that stem from the same situation or whatnot. So, if I'm looking at Ohio State players that were not invited to the Combine, I think Bowen is probably the one that was hurt the most, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you need those types of little numbers for offensive linemen to figure out how they might translate to the NFL. And interestingly enough, I wrote about this in another piece I had coming out earlier this morning by J.K. Dobbins. And I speculated that part of the reason he may have fallen in the draft is because he opted to skip out on the NFL Combine on-field drills because, he was still recuperating from that injury he had against Clemson, the high ankle sprain. So, after Ohio State's Pro Day got canceled, that meant the teams had no 40-yard dash, none of the important numbers on J.K. Dobbins that they had on a lot of the other backs. So just in general, I think, those testing numbers at the Combine can mean a lot to someone, whether it's, where they're going to go in the first or second round, or someone like Bowen, where you don't know if they're going to go in the 6th, 7th round, or if they're going to end up undrafted.
Right. There's certainly, nobody really had the idea that the world was going to shut down the way it was. I mean, we're just going to make it into April and go to the Ohio State Pro Day and be able to run and work out under favorable circumstances, have a little bit more time to get healthy. And then lo and behold, that just doesn't happen. So, I'm not going to sit there and say that, for any player, Dobbins included or not included, that decided not to work out. I mean, about it being a poor decision. I mean, you generally expect business as usual to prevail, but that's not the times that we're living in right now. But as we talked about at the top, Ohio State number 2 in terms of players drafted this year with 10, tied with Michigan. But if you really look at the numbers, I would sit there and say that the 10 versus 10 are not necessarily equal, at least in terms of draft positions. When you sit there and you see that Michigan only had 2 players taken in the first 2 days, with Cesar Ruiz going in the first round and Josh Uche going in round 2, and then everybody else went on the 3rd day with 5 players going in the 6th round for the Wolverines.
Yeah, I mean, it's, when it comes down to it in the end, 10 draft picks is 10 draft picks for a college team, and that's something you can tout your success about, when you're pitching to recruits. But, when you look at Ohio State having all those early picks versus Michigan having a lot of theirs coming on day 3, it just kind of speaks to the talent. This is not the place to get into the talent versus coaching debate that we've seen on Twitter. But, it really does come down. Ohio State has a lot of that great talent. Those prolific players that are going to be able to make an impact on the team when they first get to the NFL. When you look at the top of the draft with Chase Young and Jeff Okudah and even J.K. Dobbins a little later on, you have a lot of those players that are going to be able to make an immediate impact, and that comes down to just having the more talented roster. So when it comes down to it, 10 picks is 10 picks. But when those picks are coming a lot earlier, that means those players are probably going to be able to make a little bit more of an impact in the NFL.
I mean, such a small number of players get drafted, get to the NFL, whatnot. I don't want this to appear to be a bash session. I will leave that for other people out there or whatnot. But one of the biggest picks in terms of a Michigan player that surprised me was Donovan Peoples-Jones falling all the way into the 6th round. He's going to the Cleveland Browns, pick 187. I remember, and, I cover recruiting, and, I've got a few years on Braden in terms of age, but I remember how desperately Ohio State fans and the coaches wanted DPJ to come to Columbus. Ends up really kind of having an unremarkable career in the equation of what his talent was, what his potential was. And, I think it just kind of shows in terms of not coming off the board until, there were only 70 players behind him, or, a little less than 70 players behind him who were taken 187. I think the Browns are getting a tremendous potential type player there, but, we just haven't seen it. I mean, it just hasn't been there for him.
No, there's always going into every Michigan game the last few years, there's always been the discussion about, will Ohio State be able to stop Donovan Peoples-Jones, and that's never really been an issue during those games. I mean, he's obviously had great games with Michigan, but like you said, never really getting to that level of talent that was expected from him. But, even with that, while he never reached his full potential at Michigan, it's clear the talent he has and what Cleveland will be getting as a player. It's funny, on Twitter, I saw a few Cleveland fans that are, obviously you have a big overlap with Cleveland and Ohio State fans, a little disappointed that they were getting the Michigan receiver over KJ Hill, who was still on the board and would remain on the board for a while. But, completely different types of receivers. So I think Cleveland's going to be happy with what they got. And then, with the Chargers getting Hill, I think they're going to be happy with what they got.
And now that the draft is in the books, everybody turns their attention to 2021 and that draft. And it's always funny because we will go back when we're, within the weeks leading up to the current draft and look at that first draft that came out and see how far off it is and whatnot. But there certainly are a handful of Buckeyes that could get that first round draft grade. And we'll start with Justin Fields. But, before we started recording the podcast, we went through and listed several between ourselves.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at just in the first round. I mean, I think you're looking definitely Justin Fields. I mean, as it stands, right now, I would say Fields is probably the second quarterback off the board, probably one of the top 5 picks behind Trevor Lawrence. But, this may just be anecdotal. But, from last season, I felt like the, argument for Fields as the number 1 quarterback grew as the season went on. Obviously, Lawrence ended up, obviously they weren't on the field at the same time, but Lawrence and the Tigers ended up beating Ohio State in Fields. But, Lawrence had a tough start to the season as Fields kind of excelled in Ohio State's offense. So it felt like the tide was definitely turning in terms of Fields moving a little closer towards overtaking Lawrence as QB1 in the 2021 draft. But beyond Fields, you're looking at Sean Wade, who came back for his final. Well, he could technically come back for another season, but it will certainly be his final season with Ohio State, and he will likely be a first-round pick as well. Then you have guys like, offensive lineman Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis who can come out. So I think, they're certainly in the argument as well to be taken in the first round.
Yeah, and I want to be sure to throw Chris Olave out there too, the former 3-star recruit who stepped into a vacant role when Austin Mack got injured a couple of years ago and has really not relinquished anything at that point. Has been quite the Wolverine slayer during his career. I think he's somebody that could work his way into a first-round grade as well. Wyatt Davis, certainly. I mean, Josh Myers, you just never know. I mean, I would put him in as my preseason favorite to win the Remington for the nation's top center, and that's without knowing what else is out there. I just think that highly of Josh Myers. So, we're certainly looking at, at worst 2. I mean, 4, maybe 5. It may be a little high. I mean, things kind of ebb and flow a little bit, but it's not a case of Ohio State putting double-digit players in the draft one year and then that's that. I mean, that has not been the case for them. They're putting double-digit players in the draft a lot of years, and I mean, even on what you would sit there and say maybe was a little bit of a low year. I mean, we could look at 17. They put 7 players in the draft at that point, but 3 first-rounders with Lattimore, Hooker, and Conley. 18, they didn't quite get to 10 as well, but a couple of first-rounders with Ward and Price. It's not an anomaly of that they're just getting to a point where they're just overloaded with seniors and draft eligible players, and that they're just getting there. I mean, there is a good mixture of guys who are through their eligibility and early departures.
Yeah, I mean, I think beyond the guys we already listed in the first round, I mean, you're looking at next year. I mean, you could have as many as 4 linebackers that could take it from Ohio State. Pete Werner, Tuck Borland, Baron Browning, and Justin Hilliard, depending on how their final seasons go, all have a chance to be taken. So that would be certainly an impressive accomplishment, having 4 linebackers taken. But I mean, you could end up, like you said, every year isn't necessarily going to be 10 players with players coming out early and whatever it may be. But I think it could still be another banner year for Ohio State.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to put a wrap on this year's draft and everything else. Any final thoughts? Any points that I didn't bring up that you just can't think of ending the podcast without getting out there?
No. To be honest, I think we wrapped it up pretty well. Like we had said, obviously wishing the best for Robert Landers, hoping he could find a home here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great guys, young family now. I mean, you definitely hope he finds something. One thing I know, Landers will be successful in whatever it is that he does, and that's the end of the draft. So we just have to kind of wait and see what the next step is going to be, and in terms of what we will see for Ohio State football, I have a feeling the next thing will be us talking about some more big recruits coming down the line. But I'm not tipping my hand on anything there, but it's a great time to be a member of the Ohio State community. If you have not had a chance to sign up to the site yet, I strongly urge you to take advantage of our free trial until kickoff. That deal is ending at the end of the month. Sign up using code OSU 2020 and get on board and check it out. We've had an overwhelming response to this, so be a part of it. But I want to thank Braden for joining us. And once again, I am your host, Kevin Noon, here for the BIA podcast, and I want to thank everybody for taking part. Until next time.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game, exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.